Testing. There we go. Start it up some. That should work. So welcome. Thank you all for joining us today. And thank you to the Office of Civic Engagement for putting this on. So we're discussing Beyond the Ballot Box today. So glad you joined us. You've joined us. I'm going to introduce the panelists, but the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to read their brief bios, and I'm going to follow that bio up with a question. So since Allison Munch-Rolotto is right next to me, I'll start with her. Allison is a native Washingtonian and a proud resident of College Hill with an educational background in sociology, a BA from Whitman College, an MA, and a PhD from the University of Arizona, with emphasis in politics, social networks, and the life course. Allison strives to be a lifelong learner. She is a volunteer capacity. She serves in a volunteer capacity on several local brands, commissions, and committees. In addition to holding an elected position on the Pullman School Board, she is a founding member of Pullman's Historic Preservation Commission and is currently serving as the co-chair of the College Hill Association Board of Directors. Allison is employed in the curriculum area here in the WSU office of the registrar and is grateful for the office's tolerance and flexibility. On the weekends, Allison enjoys playing with the Border Highlanders, the regional pipe band of the Palouse. So my question for you, Allison, is can you tell us about your background and why you decided to run for the Pullman School Board?
Sure. Is this activated? Can everyone hear me? Okay. As was mentioned in my bio, I'm involved in an organization called the College Hill Association, which is based in the College Hill neighborhood, the northeast quadrant of Pullman, which is probably where most of you live, I'm guessing. College Hill is like a whole lifestyle thing. And so running for the school board, what happened is there was a vacancy on the school board, and the way school board positions are assigned are by director areas, and the area that I represent, College Hill, is about 96, 97%, maybe even more college students. So when a position came open, there was not a great interest from the neighborhood in stepping forward to fill this vacant position. And I let it sit there for quite some time, and no one was stepping forward. And I was really active at the neighborhood level already, and I just couldn't stand the idea of my neighborhood going unrepresented. So I went ahead and said, I'll do this. And that was back in 2010. And we've since just finished the 2020 census. So we had an opportunity to kind of redraw these director area districts. And I'm really hoping to get myself out of a job. But it was a good fit for, I had kids in Pullman schools until 2020. So it was a good way to be involved system-wide, although of course, when you're on the school board, you then lose the opportunity to be involved in your own children's education. So, but that's why I stepped forward. Does that answer your question, Tremaine? Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I have more follow-up questions for you. Believe you me, we're going to have fun. Simon Smith, Palouse Citizens Climate Lobby. So before coming to Pullman, Simon lived in Britain and South Africa, where he worked in the steel, plastics, oil, pharmaceutical, and ceramics manufacturing industries. A resident of Pullman for the past 23 years, Simon is a WSU alumnus with a doctorate in engineering science. He is a certified wastewater treatment plant operator and an independent consultant who develops technologies to help municipalities understand their sewer and stormwater systems. Simon joined the Palouse Center's climate lobby about 4 years ago after looking for effective ways to help mitigate the worsening climate crisis. Simon, my question for you is, can you talk a little bit about your background and what others here in this room can learn from it?
Sure. You might have picked up from that description that I've been involved in several different types of manufacturing industries. I think the guiding light for me was to pick something that, an interesting problem that I thought I could solve, and then work on that. The key throughout all of those different industries is that there was quality control. In other words, if you can help produce a better product for fewer resources, then you've had an environmental benefit and you've had commercial benefits for the company you work for. But behind that, there are interesting problems, technical problems that can consume you and absorb you and soak up your energies and keep you focused on issues that really motivate you. Now, for me, it was technical stuff. For you, it might be something completely different. But the sooner you can identify what it is that really fires you up, the better you're going to do in your career. It's a lot easier to work on something you believe in. Don't be working for a paycheck. That's for people much later on in life. At your stage, you need to be getting experience, get out there and work for a small, badly run organization. And that way, you'll get to see lots of problems and you'll be challenged on a regular basis, fighting fires day in, day out. So pick something that absorbs you, that motivates you, that really keeps you engaged, and then it'll be a doddle.
Thank you. Kiala Shaw, here, one of the Center for Civic Engagement's very own, currently works in the WSU Center for Civic Engagement as the Academic Programs Graduate Assistant. She's a master's student in WSU's Criminal Justice Program. Kiala was named the 2021 Outstanding Senior by WSU's College of Arts and Sciences for Criminal Justice and Criminology. She began her career in CCE as a community partnerships assistant and is a lifelong resident advisor in WSU's Housing and Residence Life Department. Kiala is a former chair of the CCE Advisory Board and president of both Alpha Phi Sigma and the Criminal Justice Club, and is a member of the Tri Alpha Honor Society. So Kiala, my question for you is, why did you decide to run for president of Alpha Phi Sigma and the Criminal Justice Club, and what was that process like for you?
All right. Hi, everyone. So I decided to run for president. It was a pretty smooth transition. I honestly started at a lower, like the treasurer or secretary position. With Alpha Phi Sigma especially, it actually started on the WSU campus, so it was really important that we had a strong chapter. So I started at those lower positions, got some experience. You have to meet certain requirements, and then once it was my time, I wanted to become president. I wanted to have more say in the activities that criminal justice students were able to do out in the community, such as go and visit Walla Walla State Penitentiary, meet with certain incarcerated individuals to kind of get that experience, not only in the classroom, but outside of the classroom. So the process for that was pretty simple for me because I already had a strong kind of background in the clubs. I had a strong foundation. So it was pretty easy transition. But I would say for individuals that are looking to get more involved in their clubs, for their certain departments or anything like that, to start early on. So whether you are a freshman, sophomore, even later on too, but get involved right away so that it can be a smooth transition and you already have that foundation where people rely on you, they trust you, they can come to you when it comes to certain issues, and they look to you to provide those activities for you all to get experience. So, yeah.
Thank you. Can I ask you a follow-up question? You mentioned your studies, criminal justice and criminology. How do you find your civic engagement tying in with your criminal justice and criminology studies and research?
Yeah, so I take a very rehabilitative approach to the criminal justice system. I believe that rehabilitation is one of the main goals for individuals not to recidivate. So in order for individuals to get experience within prison, we have programs such as you'll see the rehabilitative programs with dogs, or you'll see that they'll be able to plant gardens, but you don't have those opportunities without certain nonprofits partnering with prisons to provide those opportunities for incarcerated individuals. I also had a family member that was incarcerated, so it was really important to get that experience moving on into my academic career and research. And also we have community service orders. So once people are released, because because the majority of people in prison get released. You have to have those nonprofits that can give those certain guidelines or assist with community service orders to fulfill more requirements that incarcerated individuals have to kind of contribute to the community or kind of fulfill those requirements in order to be fully released. And so for me, it's really important to engage with nonprofits and see how they can help incarcerated individuals within prison and once they are released into the community. So that's kind of what I focus on. And so working with nonprofits and identifying service learning opportunities for students, whatever class you're in, is really important to me, and taking that rehabilitative approach to the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Thank you all. And we have an amazing group of panelists here, as you can see. I guess I should tell you who I am and why I'm standing up in front of you as the moderator. My name is Tremaine Gaither. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Interim Director of Community and Public Affairs here at WSU in the Chancellor's Office, and I'm also the Special Assistant to the Provost for Inclusive Excellence. And very grateful to be in front of you all. So we're talking about civic engagement. I say let's take a step back for a moment, and I'll open this question up to the panelists, to the entire group. How would you define community engagement or civic engagement? Well, how would you define that? Civic engagement.
Civic engagement, from my perspective, and I'm a sort of, you could say, an observer, because I came in to the US about 23 years ago. But civic engagement for me is when people identify an issue that they think is important, they learn about the topic, and then they go about doing something to make a more constructive outcome in that area. But the idea of civic is just to be an active member of society, to learn as much as you can about the topic so that you can inform other people and get people on your side and steer action towards achieving positive outcomes. But being informed is absolutely crucial, and it's becoming more and more difficult to be properly informed. So civic, yeah, again, looking around at your social arrangements, whatever it is in your immediate vicinity that you know about, is something where you can get engaged.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add, I think of civic engagement or community engagement as contributing to a cause that's greater than you. It's the individuals within a certain area that create that community. So if you all aren't getting involved, or you don't have individuals kind of pushing that active citizenship, it can be extremely difficult to not only feel like you have a sense of belonging, but also get involved with other community members.
Thank you both. So you both mentioned choosing a cause that's important to you, cultivating that sense of belonging. What other benefits do you see when young people decide to get engaged with the community or the needs of the community? Are there any other benefits?
Well, I would, I guess, chime in from my experience when college age, at least here in our local setting, here in Pullman, the population is, something like half college students in Pullman, somewhere between half and 2/3. Yet, if you look at where decisions get made, any kind of local decisions, there's often zero student voice in that aspect of things. And so what happens is, should a student decide to participate at some level, their voice will automatically carry the weight of thousands and thousands of people. And so to me, the biggest benefit is that it would really be taken seriously.
Yeah. I think the other benefit for getting engaged is you'll find pretty soon that you may be the only proponent for your position, which means that you'll be shouldering most of the activities. You'll be perhaps having to organize things, perhaps having to work on communications. You'll be doing things that really stretch you as an individual. So when you pick a topic and you start getting involved in civic engagement, your growth as an individual is vastly accelerated, because you'll see needs that other people won't see, and you'll know that you're the only one that can probably step up and answer those questions and fulfill that role. So it'll test you, and it'll stretch you, and it'll be a great opportunity to fail early, which is good. It's good for growth, but it's failing with a great safety net, because you're the proponent for an issue. You can't really put a foot wrong as long as you
succeed, though.
You can also succeed. That happens too. But using the Citizens Climate Lobby as an example of that, they have a whole bunch of tools to help people become empowered to speak out and let their voices become much more powerful. And those tools are just basically that, tools. So on the website, they have all these different techniques that people can use to get in with their representatives and speak out. I don't want to go on to the discussion of the organization, but that's the idea is you pick up skills that you will carry through in your careers in all sorts of different areas. And as soon as you're motivated behind a particular topic and you're speaking out from the heart, people pick up on that. And so you can make all sorts of gaffes and mistakes. It doesn't matter, because if you're being genuine in your cause, it'll carry. So skill sets.
Thank you. You raised a great point. As I was preparing for this panel discussion, I did a little research, and studies show that young people who are engaged civically tend to become more educated and become higher wage earners. And I thought to myself, why is it? That makes perfect sense to me, because I was actually a community organizer. I didn't walk into it thinking, oh, I just want to become a community organizer or an activist. I saw a need that really mattered to me. When I was, I would say no older than 23, 24, I noticed in North Carolina, we was the only state outside of New York that could try 16-year-olds as adults and as a criminal. So there's no juvenile court. You're straight tried as an adult and put in adult jails and adult prisons at 16, 17. And I just knew something was inherently wrong about that. I had friends who were 17, 18 years old, or students that I was mentoring who I was trying to convince to go to college. They couldn't even go to college because they were already felons. They had just turned 18 and they had never spent a day in jail. How was that possible? So I became active. And when I did that, like Simon mentioned, my skill sets grew, my soft skills, the ability to communicate effectively, to organize, to empathize with people from different sides of the aisle. And it expanded my network. I ended up taking an appointed position for the city of Charlotte. I started to oversee the Know Your Rights campaign, all because I decided to take that leap and to organize and fight for something I believed in. My network grew. I had the chief of police in my cell phone, the mayor. I had their direct phone numbers, and that's really helped me professionally. So I just want to put that out there. There are benefits to civic engagement, a lot of benefits. So I want to go back to you, Simon, because you lived all over the world, and you've been in Pullman for 23 years. From your vantage point, what are some of the unique challenges facing our Pullman community?
Well, from the Citizens Climate Lobby group, it's great to have students recruited and on board. But what typically happens with the college town is those people come in, they're enthusiastic, they participate, but then they move away. So there's a constant erosion of skill sets, a constant erosion of support that needs to be consistently replenished. So there's a lot of focus on keeping, recruiting new people, training them as fast as possible, getting them to know as much as possible about the organization and what we do. And then when they move on with that new skill set, to bring in the next round of people in. So that would be a constant concern for a college town. Bearing in mind, we've got, 18,000 students and about 12,000 consistent residents, or perhaps more than that now, 15,000. So the bulk of the energy and the focus can come from students, but it erodes very quickly. I think that would be one of the concerns. The other is that everybody's extremely busy. There's a lot of pressure on the academics. There's a lot of pressure for people in town to, just keeping things going. So that means that you have to allow people to participate in that sort of civic engagement at whatever level they can contribute. And there are a variety of options for participation, with civic engagement, people have to pick their own level. You can throw a lot of hours at it, or you can throw an absolute minimum. The important thing is whatever you do is to try and be effective. And then it gets back to those business of tools and techniques. And how can you get the most bang for your contribution, your time and your effort?
Thank you. Would you like to add to that, Allison? You serve on so many boards and commissions. What are some of the challenges that you see are unique to our community here in Pullman?
Yeah, what Simon said about the transitory nature of the population is really an issue, especially, at the neighborhood level on College Hill. Just people, if you're always moving in and out, which most leases, people are just living, a year or less, they hardly have a time they're getting settled in their own personal residence, much less at the neighborhood level or the civic level. So just the constant transitions are really an issue.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So my initial, when I hear the word civic engagement during an election year, I immediately think about voting. Although, civic engagement is much more than that. I think I'll be remiss not to talk about voting. So I'm just going to open this up to the group. Should young people vote? And if so, why? And if not, why not? When I talk to some young people, there is some apathy there, especially with college students who may not feel like residents of the town that they're in, et cetera. So should young people vote? Why or why not?
How many of you are voting age already?
Everyone.
Everybody?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Oh, should we?
So there's a process you'll go through as you fill in that ballot, where you have to cross a box and suddenly realize, I don't know anything about this individual or this topic. And that's the starting point for civic engagement in a way, because as soon as you start putting a tick on the ballot, you're going to be asking yourself all sorts of questions about what is it they stand for, how does it match up with my own personal values, and those sorts of questions. So I'm assuming that everyone is going to vote. I've skipped over that part of it because voting is just, it can't be overestimated. I left it a long time before applying for citizenship, but it was agonizing to watch the sort of things happening in politics and not being participant in that exercise. I can't imagine what it would be like to not have a vote and to see these things happening, sometimes not always to the benefit of the things that you value. So yeah, absolutely. If you have a personal sense of values or ethics, and there are very few people that don't, you will be looking and asking questions, looking at the ballot form and asking yourself those questions. So getting informed is the starting point, and you will discover pretty quickly what fires you up.
We have a great luxury in Washington State of having the mail-in ballots. So, it's kind of a throwaway question because it is so easy, but I do understand if we were in a different situation where you had to stand in line all day to vote, you would have to make a personal decision, right? Because you might be losing a day's pay or something to go out and cast your vote. So, but yes, of course, you should vote. But my kids are 20 and 24, and they have sort of opposite opinions about voting. My 24-year-old thinks it's absolutely worthless because, and I'm sympathetic to the sense of futility. So if people are bitter or jaded about it, I get it. Just every time it comes around, it's an opportunity for change. So I think it's worth it.
Yeah, if I could add to, I think what's so amazing about being in a college town especially is that this is one of the first opportunities for students to kind of get outside of their family's beliefs and create beliefs for themselves. And so I think that's what's fascinating, is that you can get informed, but you now don't have to kind of follow what your parents told you your entire life, or you can learn more about certain political parties that you didn't know about and have your own beliefs. And I can definitely see why certain individuals don't vote. A lot of people think that you're just one person, so my one vote doesn't count. But when you have, hundreds of thousands of people thinking that way, that's when the problem happens. And so I think, don't think that way, vote, and definitely kind of contribute to that change that Allison was talking about earlier, and kind of start creating your own beliefs about what you believe in and what you want to vote for, so that you can be informed and confident with the decisions you make.
This issue of the importance of voting, though, I lived in South Africa during the 70s and 80s, and then also in the 90s. So I saw it under apartheid, when black people couldn't vote. And I saw it post-apartheid, where black people could vote. It makes a difference. And then you will start to really appreciate the difference in how it impacts individuals, how they feel about themselves, how they interact with each other, and how basically everybody walks taller when they vote. When you have an investment in your own society, and you can you can put in a ballot, it makes a difference. You suddenly have a real investment in your own citizenship. The fact that you're engaged and you know that your vote, yes, it may be diluted amongst a huge number, but it's still part of that process. You basically become the owner of the government. A slight component, but yeah, it's still absolutely vital. And there are techniques that you can use as a voting person to maximize your influence as a voter. Yes, voting is important, but there's a lot of other processes that happen in between election cycles. And you can participate in those if you're a voter. If you're not a voter, you don't really matter. And if people realize you're not a voter, you don't count. You need to be part of that discussion.
Thank you. How did it land with everybody? Let me ask you, how many of you can relate to Allison's son, feeling like there's a little apathy there, like what's the point? Anyone relate to that a little bit? So I see some heads shaking, yeah. So everyone in here is planning to vote. I can relate to the son. I can relate to her son, for sure. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of highs and lows, when it comes to participating as a citizen in the politics of things. So I'm going to talk about, I still want to encourage, I think there's some people in here that may not say it or admit it, that probably still needs a little encouragement. I'm going to throw this to you, Kiala. How can we encourage young people to vote? You all sort of alluded to it, but how can we encourage young people to vote?
That's a good question. I would say we can encourage people to vote by, I think, everyday practices and just being informed and finding things out for yourself. I also come from a background where I didn't think voting was that important, but then I think about felony disenfranchisement, and I want to be a voice for those that don't have the right to vote anymore, because we have so many systems of oppression in the United States targeted towards minority populations. And so I didn't find the importance of voting until I identified those issues. So I think we encourage students to vote by providing the resources for you all to learn and gain that experience on your own, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's out in the community. Identifying what you are passionate about, I think, encourages you to then fight for those causes through your voice in voting. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you all sort of encouraged the group to vote. So thank you both. Thank you all. So voting is one aspect of community engagement or civic engagement. There's others. There's also activism. There's community organizing. What would you say are the differences between community organizing, community activism, and civic engagement? Or is there a difference? differences between community organizing and activism, perhaps, or the similarities, how they're intertwined?
I view the activism and that organizing as part of that civic engagement under that umbrella. And I suppose you could say aspects, they blend into each other. Activism, I'm not sure how I would make a distinction between that and community organizing. But if people want to be effective in the way they reach out, they're going to choose methods. And generally, the best methods are the ones that will engage their target and actually not put up barriers or unnecessary hurdles. So let's say with the Citizens Climate Lobby, we place a great deal of emphasis on being nonpartisan, which sounds a bit strange, but we want everybody on board. And if we focus on the issue, which is reducing carbon emissions, then we have to accept everybody's participation or encourage everyone's participation. We need to communicate in a way that doesn't offend people and put their backs up. Otherwise, you just lose support. So automatically, by encouraging people to participate, that would be it's quite community organizing, but it's ideally encouraging people to act together as a group. I'm losing my thread a bit, but the idea of getting everybody on board is, in a sense, activism. We tend not to do the things that are get in people's faces or get people's backs up, because then we'll just lose support. The idea is to encourage involvement. So we tend to choose the very positive engagement methods where we build relationships of trust. When the group meets with members of Congress and talks to them about climate legislation, we put any questions. They could make a complete fool of themselves if they want. It's not going to get out. So we keep things confidential, and you'd think, well, there's an opportunity to score political points. That would be a very short-lived exercise to do that with a politician. So your target really determines what tools you use. If you want to get people to rethink something they're doing, which is basically criminal, you don't have to worry so much about offending them. However, if you want people to get engaged and support and move forward, you're going to count on them to be positive and constructive. And for that, you need to treat them with respect and engage them positively.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. So what I'm hearing you say is, yes, activism, community organizing, that's a part of civic engagement. And I imagine the panelists all agree with that. And that's pretty tough work. I'll tell you, going back to my story of there being fighting for North Carolina to raise their minimum age of who could be tried as an adult from 16 to 18. I worked and organized and fought that fight for about 8 years. North Carolina didn't raise that legal limit until I moved here to Pullman in 2019. So there's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows, and it takes a lot of patience. So jumping to the lows for a moment. I'm looking at you, Allison, because you have such extensive work, from your the local boards you serve on, and the commissions and committees. Would you like to share with the group one of your low moments, and what did you do to overcome that, to persevere? Getting vulnerable now.
I mean, I think how I overcome and persevere is I do not focus on low moments. I just keep going one step at a time, day in, day out. Thinking about going back to the activism question or the specific strategies, it's not for us, like in College Hill, it's not all about change, trying to cause a change, but just building awareness. And some of the techniques that we do are, just writing letters whenever there's an opportunity to provide input and mentioning our issues. I have monthly meetings scheduled with people when there's nothing on the agenda, but just getting to know each other and build a trusting relationship so that when a decision time comes around, that person can anticipate what the College Hill Association is going to say, for example. So there's just a range of things. One of our changes that we're really focused on right now is the urban forest of College Hill. If you're familiar with the neighborhood, you probably know there's a lot of gorgeous old trees, and you may have noticed that some of those trees are not looking so good. And you may have noticed that there are some places between the street and the sidewalk where there should be trees, but there's not trees. And so we're really focused on how can we get more interest from the city, but also, adjacent property owners in really trying to fix this problem. This is related to your work, Simon, because you know that trees help to sequester carbon.
Urban heat
Yeah.
island.
Yeah. So, and they provide so many benefits for people walking around the neighborhood. They encourage walking. They reduce our energy consumption because they promote cooling of buildings. So this is just a big, big cause. But Pullman right now has a landscape where there's just there are no ordinances really covering this area. We're in Eastern Washington. We don't like to give people unnecessary regulations for anything. So we'll just let what happens. And, I'm not prepared to accept that anymore, and neither is the College Hill Association. So we have this as one of our top strategic goals, is to really get Pullman on board with urban forestry and to get everybody caring about it too. So we're open to all techniques, all participants, anybody who's interested in this. I think it's going to take research. It's going to take people who are studying, environmental science and forestry. It's going to take people interested in government and how ordinances are written and where they're accepted and how they're accepted. It's related to stormwater. Isn't that one of your? Yeah, because trees filter stormwater as it comes down. It's just one of those issues that I think almost everyone can touch on. And the more that we can make it relevant to people, I think the more it will probably catch on. But I don't have the low moment, to go back to your question, is just that how did we get to this place? How did we just allow these gorgeous, an 80 to 100-year-old oak tree? Why are we just letting people cut these down?
Thank you. You mentioned the forestry and the trees. I sense that there are issues that everyone on this panel is passionate about. So how else can young people get involved and take their student involvement to the next level?
Well, I'll say our board of directors, we are holding positions open for students. If anybody is interested in issues like this, we do our elections historically. Our elections to the board of directors are in September. But in the post-COVID environment, we've had a little bit more difficulty reaching out to students. So we've just held some positions open for students. And I would love to work with students either on a position on the board or just volunteering in any issue. You can, almost any neighborhood issue. It's funny how this morning I was at a meeting. There's a group called the Town Gown Collaborative that is looking at public litter containers on College Hill, and where have they gone and how have they been vandalized, and do we need public litter containers? Somebody's going to have to make these decisions, whether or not we will have public litter containers in our neighborhood, and if so, who will pay for them? So just every aspect of public life, if you happen to live in the neighborhood, there's an opportunity for you to weigh in and contribute, and you are welcome in our association. So.
Yeah, I think that it's a similar situation with the Citizens Climate Lobby. The Palouse Citizens Climate Lobby is the local branch of a national network. I mentioned that the Citizens Climate Lobby has a whole bunch of tools that are already developed. So if you were to participate or join that organization, there would be a lot of tools already developed for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. The other thing is that it's a local group. There are already plenty of members, and these people help each other. So you don't have to be the one with all of the answers all of the time. There are resources within the group, like Pete Haug, who is one of our members who writes opinion pieces for the local paper. He helps people when they want to draft a letter to the editor so they can rework it, and when they put out a product, send a letter to the editor of the local paper. They know that it's a fairly polished, finished product, and they can be proud of it. Those sorts of skills are present in-house. As I say, you don't have to come up with all of the answers by yourself. So if you do have low points, you can also lean on other members. You don't have to be the one with all the answers and be the one with making all the effort. There are people who can pick up things. There are people with good networks that you can draw on their support and get their enthusiasm and their support to get things through. So, yeah, you don't have to be the only one with the burden. Share.
I would say for me, it always comes down to passion, and a lot of individuals, whether you know your passion or not, you can still get involved. So if you know your passion, you can do opportunities that fulfill that passion for you or contribute to you gaining more experience with something you already know you're passionate about. For those of you that don't know what your passion is quite yet, rely on those opportunities. So the Center for Civic Engagement, there's a ton of opportunities for you all to experience, even if you don't know your passion. We have the first year living room on the WSU campus. Rely on your resident advisors, rely on your faculty to get that networking experience to then get involved. So for me, it's always about the passion, because once you develop that passion along the way, it allows you to kind of be up here with us and talk so deeply about the things that we really are passionate about and care about and contribute to every single day.
Thank you. Yeah. Try to emphasize. That's what I like to say. If you're unsure about your passions or what you're concerned about, try some of these options on for size that the CCE can present you with. I would also say, if you really want to learn the ins and outs, show up to city council meetings. Find out what's going on. What are they talking about? What's happening in the city? Know who and I believe Simon mentioned this, know who your elected officials are. Know who they are. They're supposed to be an email away or only a phone call away. They represent you. And that's another way. And like they all mentioned, particularly Allison, there are boards you can sit on for the city. All you have to do is apply and be a Pullman resident over the age of 18. You can apply to sit there's a DEI board for the city, or DEI commission or task force for the city. There's the Pullman Arts Commission. They may not have any available board seats, but if there are available seats, you can apply. So I think that's also important. I'm a part of a strategic tourism working group. We're hosting some focus groups October 19th and 20th. If you would like to, give input on what you think Pullman could or should offer downtown Pullman, to, what can we do to invite more tourists to the city? You're welcome to reach out to me and serve in that capacity. And again, it's going to be an opportunity for you to get to know the leaders, who the leaders are in the city, and grow your skill set and grow your network. So we're towards the end. I think we're about to open it up for Q&A. But before we do that, final thoughts from the panelists. Any last words?
Is it possible to have a few minutes to perhaps describe the organizations that we support?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Does anyone want to go first?
Go for it.
Go for it.
Well, I'd just like to say a few words about the Palouse Citizens Climate Lobby. I've mentioned them several times. They're part of the national group, the Citizens Climate Lobby, and I can quickly outline who they are and what they do and how they do it. The main thing is that those of you that are aware of the climate situation are probably already doing things for yourself. You might be recycling, you might be cutting out wasteful trips or using public transport. Those are great. Those actions are excellent. But to really have a systemic impact, we need legislative changes. We need new policies in government to bring about the changes that are needed as fast as we need them. So there are organizations like that on campus. The Environmental Sustainability Alliance is one. There's also the Fossil-Free WSU organization, which is a fairly new organization. But The problem that people are trying to solve is that our Congress people are surrounded by bad information. Basically, they're not bad people, they just have a lot of bad information. And so what Citizens Climate Lobby does is it tries to get good information to those people. And in order to do that, well, perhaps a simplified picture is that the Citizens Climate Lobby in DC monitors the legislation that goes through to Congress. If they see a particularly good piece of climate legislation, they send that information out to all their members, like the Blue Citizens Climate Lobby. When we see that legislation, people will decide, is this good for Pullman? Is this good for the Palouse? And if we think it is, we then promote that to our local legislators and try and get them aware that there is some good climate legislation they should consider co-sponsoring. So that's the main mechanism. But to do that locally, we meet on a sort of monthly basis. We alternate between Moscow and Pullman. We look at the legislation that's available just in sort of bullet point form. And then we might form teams, like lobby teams, who will contact the legislator and sit with them and talk to them about the good points of that climate legislation for this district. There's also, to do that, we make sure that there's a lot of training so that people feel comfortable going about this exercise. But that sounds like it's a lot of work and a lot of engagement. There are things you can do to contribute to that process that only take a few minutes each month. And you can choose, if you have a look at the Citizens Climate Lobby, you can choose to participate at whatever level you have, wherever you want to get engaged in. So one of the most effective campaigns is something called a monthly calling campaign. And to give you an example of how that works, I participate in that. Every month I'll get a text message on my phone. It says it's that time to call. I have the text message will have the phone number of the legislator, the local legislator, and I'll contact them. There'll be a topic, a suggested topic, but all I have to say is who I am. I'm a constituent, I'm a voter, that essential voting thing. And this is the topic I'm concerned about. And the reason that's so effective, it takes me 5 minutes to do one representative and 2 senators, because I might end up speaking to their aide or their answering machine. But what they record is your name and the issue. So at the end of the week, end of the month, they look through the lists and they see climate change, climate change, climate change, climate change, because there are lots of other people also phoning. And the reason that's effective is because those Congress people then can feel comfortable talking to their constituents about a topic they know they're concerned about. So your Congress people will stick their necks out, they'll know more about the climate issues and be in a better position to act. That's from their perspective. But from your perspective, what you'll notice when you put that phone down is there's a feeling of agency, of having acted on this systemic, this global problem that may seem formidable, but you have just provided part of the solution to that process. And it not only gives you the sense of agency, it gives you a feeling of optimism and hope that builds a bit of momentum and allows you to get more positively engaged in other parts of civic activism. So it's an essential thing. You get the sort of reminder once a month. It keeps you engaged, it keeps you moving, it keeps you positive, and it helps diminish some of the quite justified cynicism, but you need to be acting to diffuse that. So all of those types of tools are available with the Citizens Climate Lobby. What I would encourage you to do, of course I'm self-interested here, is join the group, learn some of those tools. If you get those tools under your in your grasp and comfortable doing it, just reaching out and phoning your representative, who is your public servant, you will feel comfortable doing that on any topic, not just climate change. You can cut your teeth with the Citizens Climate Lobby, get to grips with the tools, and then use them for any other issue that you're concerned about. There's no reason why you can't pick up the phone and speak to your representative or your senator, leave a message for them. I'm concerned about this issue. That's all you have to say. This issue, this is who I am. It's really low burden, and everybody can fit that sort of 5 minutes in each month. And the reason it's so important, as I say, it builds hope. So we're a nonpartisan group. We don't get involved in politics. We accept everybody because we need everybody's involvement to solve this problem. And we put a lot of emphasis on civility and respect, and there are great tools that people can build with that. It really does empower individuals to become effective in whatever issue they choose to be engaged in.
It's great information. Thank you.
Are you representing an organization?
All I would say rather quickly is that I'm a part of the Center for Civic Engagement. So again, get involved because the more you get involved in your community, the more you will notice the inequities in society. So just get involved, whether you have a passion or not. You learn and can gain that passion by doing certain projects, and our department allows for those opportunities. So that's all I really have to say.
Okay, building off that, I'll just say, if you live in the College Hill neighborhood, which is anywhere in town with a northeast address prefix, whether you're next to campus, Greek Row area, or farther out in apartment land, you are already considered a member of the College Hill Association. If you've ever volunteered in one of our projects, like the Adopt a Block project is one that many people have volunteered, then you're a supporting member of our association. So thank you for that. And we do have projects that you can volunteer in. We also have a friendly contest each semester called the Yard of the Semester recognition contest, which is just meant to cultivate awareness of creating a positive neighborhood environment through yard maintenance. I know these are very small, simple things, but I mean, everything we can do to improve the appearance of the neighborhood makes it cleaner, safer, more welcoming for everyone.
Thank you. And I'm going to end with, I believe it's voter.org. I believe you can check to make sure you're registered to vote. And not only check to make sure you've registered to vote, track your vote once you voted to make sure it was counted. So voting is only one part of the process. I think it's important to track your vote as well. And Washington State, I believe, has a way to do that. So that's what I'm going to end on. Thank you. And I think we're going to now go into Q&A. Dave, did you have something you want to share as far as Q&A goes?
We can get people moving with that, sure. So those of you, I'll get a microphone.
Thank you.
Those of you who are registered on GivePulse can have their hours tracked by the Center for Civic Engagement for this and any other activities that you do. Those of you who are registered and are interested in having your vote tracked, I would love for you to take a selfie or to have a neighbor take your picture, and you will submit that with your impact. So go ahead, now's a great time. Go ahead and take a picture of yourself. You will submit that as an attachment to your impact in GivePulse, and we will then verify your hour in the Center for Civic Engagement. We will run around this microphone for anyone who has any questions for our panelists or moderator as soon as you're done taking the pictures.
If you don't ask questions, we get to ask questions. So who's concerned about climate change? So show of hands. There's a couple. Okay. What would your concerns be right now for going forward? If somebody said, okay, let's start some action on climate change, how would you?
Have you, or has any organization you're part of, worked on like recycling batteries, like lithium-ion batteries, so that they can be reused again instead of just based, like right now, without recycling them, I think they're almost as harmful as fossil fuels. But if we can get to a point where we can recycle them and reuse them, then we could actually beat it and still have private transportation, I guess.
Right, you're right. You've highlighted an issue there. The question was about recycling batteries. What can be done about that? What does Citizens Climate Lobby do about that? Actually, nothing directly. We're a single issue type organization where we look at the release of carbon dioxide, and that's about it. But there are pieces of legislation that we support that will border on that. There was one about 2 years ago that was talking about putting federal funding towards battery development. And if you've been following developments in China, the CATL, the Chinese battery company, has about 5,000 scientists and engineers working on developing new types of battery technologies. You mentioned the issue of battery impact on the environment. That's a huge concern. But the CATL in February this year announced that they've moved away from the lithium battery, and they said they can produce sodium batteries. Sodium is a lot more available. They've also eliminated copper from one of the electrodes and gone to aluminium. They've solved another issue of cobalt being present in the battery, which is a concern with Central Africa and its destabilizing effect there. So there's a bunch of really nice developments in the technology area. And the reason I mentioned that is that some of the policies that Citizens Climate Lobby support will trigger investments in innovation and technology, with the idea of moving the US to participate in this, I think it's about $23 trillion new clean energy global environment. So people are going to be developing technologies to solve the carbon problem. The US needs to be part of that. And CCL is trying to ensure that we do get the policies to support that sort of innovation, just the way that the Chinese have done, because they've really solved a whole bunch of questions with that particular development. But no, we don't do anything directly. We support the policies that may trigger that sort of innovation.
Other questions?
So who thinks climate change is solvable? Yeah, we got one. We've got a 50%, so we've got 2.5. Because, okay, the reason I asked that question is when we think about solving climate change problems, we think of, oh, we have to cut out meat, we have to stop doing that, stop doing the other. They're all deprivations. But actually, if we get sources of abundant clean technology available affordably, then suddenly our style of life, our quality of life changes. And that sort of thing will happen throughout the world. There'll be places in India and Africa and all these different places that currently don't have the grid burden that we have. And they'll be able to move forward a lot faster, but their quality of life will improve dramatically. So although it looks like it's a bit of an insolvable problem, it isn't. If like a country like this one that puts its mind to things and in 10 years could put a man on the moon, really energy is not such a big problem. So there are optimistic things to have in the future. If you think the future looks like a smoking crater, it's going to be very hard to get out of bed in the morning. But if you're participating in things that will improve the situation, you're going to have some pep in your step. It's going to be a lot easier to function. And those things are doable. It's important to keep that optimism there. Otherwise, you'll find it very difficult to get engaged, stay engaged, and be really productive members of society. That's not an absolute, you don't have to do that, but it makes it easier. Yes.
You said earlier that legislators are not educated enough in climate change and that your organization is working to change that. That's what your organization does. How does your organization deal with lobbyists who are against your organization? You know, they do donations and gifts, especially during elections, so that policies aren't signed. So how does your organization combat that?
That is present. So the fossil fuel industries get about $20 billion a year from the federal government, and they seem to be able to recycle 200 million of that into election campaigns. But it's not the fossil fuel companies that vote. So if you can get the message out, get people participating and asking questions of their congresspeople, what are you doing about this? Have you heard about that? Get them aware of these different solutions, get possibilities. They hear that too. Yes, the fossil fuel companies do speak loudly, but you know that there's not much you can do about that. And so if you look at the situation and say, what can you do that has an effect? Just make sure that you pick up the tools that give you the most powerful impact and lean on those hard. And I don't think there's anything that can really stop that sort of approach. But you're right, it looks as though the field is stacked. However, they still don't vote.
Thank you all again for coming. Give our amazing panelists a round of applause. Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday or Tuesday.